Didn't have a name for it yet. Just a pressure. A quiet hunger. The kind you swallow because it doesn't look like anything to other people. By the time June arrived, I was already tired in a way sleep couldn't touch. My apartment on campus smelled like sun-warmed laundry and stale coffee, the kind of place you lived in because it was close to classes, not because it held you. The air conditioner clicked on and off like it was undecided about helping. Outside, the world moved the way it always did in early summer, bikes cutting across sidewalks, laughter spilling out of open car windows, someone's music pulsing through thin walls. And me? I moved like I was trying not to disturb my own life. I told myself I was fine. I said it the way you say a word so often it starts to lose meaning. I had a best friend who knew my favorite Thai order by heart. I had a summer plan, technically. I had a resume folder full of responsible choices. I even had a therapist's voice in my head reminding me to breathe through spirals, to notice 5 things I could see, 4 things I could touch. It just didn't fix the part of me that felt stuck. Not sad exactly, not dramatic, just suspended, like a song paused mid-note. I'd sit on the edge of my bed and scroll until my thumb went numb, watching strangers live loudly while I lived quietly, and the quiet started to feel like a decision I hadn't made consciously. I didn't date much. Not because I couldn't, but because every time I tried, it felt like wearing someone else's coat, heavy in the wrong places, tight where it shouldn't be. I'd laugh at the right moments, tilt my head the right way, nod as a guy talked about his internship or his gym routine, and somewhere inside I'd go a little blank. Number. Not blank. Elsewhere. Like my body was in one room and my mind had stepped into the hallway for air. Maya used to tease me for it, gently. She had a way of being bright without being exhausting, like she carried light in her pockets and handed it out when she noticed you dimming. We'd met freshman year in a lab where neither of us knew what we were doing, bonded over shared panic and caffeine. Since then, she'd become my person, the one who showed up with soup when I got sick, the one who could look at my face and tell when I was lying. That week, she caught me in the library, perched on a chair with my laptop open and my focus scattered. She dropped into the seat across from me like she belonged there, hair still damp from the pool, cheeks flushed from the heat. "Okay," she said, pulling a lip balm from her bag. "I'm calling it. You've been acting like you're waiting for something." I blinked. Waiting for what? For whatever it is you don't want to admit you want. I laughed, but it sounded thin to my own ears. That's vague. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing in that playful, accusing way. "No, Avery. It's you. You get quiet when you're trying not to want things. Like if you don't say it out loud, it can't ask anything of you." I stared at the lines of text on my screen, words blurring slightly. The air in the library was cold enough to raise goosebumps on my arms. I rubbed at one without thinking. "I don't know what you mean," I said. Maya's expression softened. She didn't push. She rarely did. She just watched me, like she was waiting for me to arrive in the same room as myself. Then she sat back and exhaled like she'd made a decision. "Come with me," she said. "To where?" "Home. For the summer." She said it casually, like it was already obvious. "My mom's place. You know, the house with the pool and the weird lemon tree that drops fruit like it's angry." I blinked again, slower this time. "Maya." "You don't have plans," she cut in, not unkindly. I asked. "You said you were figuring it out." "I am figuring it out." "You've been figuring it out since March." She smiled, but it didn't fully reach her eyes. "Come. It'll be good. Sun. Food. You can actually breathe." There was a beat of silence where I felt something small in my chest loosen and then tighten again. Because there was a risk in accepting something easy, Easy meant proximity. Easy meant being seen. Easy meant not being able to hide behind excuses like busy schedules and deadlines. And even then, it wasn't Maya that made my stomach twist. It was the way she said my mom's place. Because I'd met Elena once, briefly, a year ago, when Maya's parents came to campus for a weekend. It hadn't been dramatic. Just a lunch, a few photos, polite conversation. But Elena had left an impression anyway. Not because she'd tried to. She hadn't done anything showy, nothing loud. She'd simply been present. I remembered her hands more than anything. The way she passed a glass of water across the table with this calm exactness, like she understood the weight of ordinary things. The way she looked at you when you spoke. Really looked. Like listening was an action, not a courtesy. She wore linen that day, pale and effortless, her hair pinned back in a way that made her face feel open. Her voice had been low, warm, not flirtatious, not sweet, just real. I'd noticed too much, which was embarrassing and confusing and, if I was honest, a little frightening, because you don't get to notice someone's voice like that without your body remembering it. Still, I told myself it was nothing. Elena was an adult, a mother, a person who belonged to someone else's world. The way teachers belong to classrooms and doctors belong to hospitals. People you respected. People you didn't imagine. I mean, who imagines a friend's mother? So when Maya said, 2 months, please, my first instinct was to say no. Not because I didn't want to go, because I wanted to too much. I opened my mouth and felt the refusal hovering there, ready, practical, safe. But then I saw the way Maya was watching me. Not asking for entertainment, not asking for company, asking for closeness. And I realized how rarely I said yes to anything that might change the shape of my days. Okay, I heard myself say. Maya's face brightened instantly. Yes? Yes, I repeated, and it came out shakier than I meant it to. I'll come. She let out a little laugh of relief and reached across the table, squeezing my hand once. It was quick, friendly, familiar. But the contact made my skin flare hot anyway, like my nerves had been waiting for proof that I could still feel things. There, she said, like she'd won something. See? You're not allergic to life. I tried to smile. Don't make it weird. Too late, she said, grinning. I'm texting my mom. My throat tightened. Right now? I asked, too fast. Maya looked up, amused. What? Are you scared my mom's going to say no? Number. Not that. I watched her thumbs move across her phone, fast and confident. The screen reflected faintly in her eyes, tiny little glints. My pulse ticked in my throat. Elena would read a message. Elena would imagine me in her house. Elena would picture me at her table, in her kitchen, near her pool, moving through her space like I belonged there. I told myself it didn't matter, that she probably wouldn't think anything of it beyond logistics, that I was just Maya's friend. Still, my body didn't believe me. I could already smell the chlorine, sharp and clean. I could already feel heat on my shoulders, the kind that made you aware of your own skin. I could already hear a screen door sliding open, the gentle clap of it shutting behind you. And, underneath all that, something quieter. A thought I didn't want to think, because thinking it would make it real. What if she sees me? Not as Maya's friend, not as a guest, as something else. People don't talk about the moment before you understand yourself, the moment when you're still in the dark, but something has started moving inside you anyway. It doesn't feel like revelation. It feels like misplacement. Like the world is the same, but your internal compass is suddenly unreliable. Some things shift before you're ready to name them. Maya's phone buzzed. She glanced down and smiled. She said yes, Maya announced, and that she's excited. My mouth went dry. She's excited? Maya rolled her eyes. My mom loves hosting. She'll probably cook for you until you explode. I tried to laugh with her, tried to keep my face neutral, tried to pretend my ribs weren't tightening around my lungs. Excited. A simple word. Innocent. Normal. But it landed in me like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples spreading out in directions I couldn't predict. I closed my laptop, suddenly unable to pretend I was studying. I told myself I was just nervous about being out of my routine, about being in someone else's home, about being the extra person in a family space. That was all. That had to be all. But later that night, when I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling fan turning slow circles, the same thought returned. Quieter, but sharper. What if she already knows something I don't? And for the first time in a long time, the quiet inside me wasn't empty. It was listening. The drive down felt longer than it should have. Not because of traffic, or distance, or the way the heat blurred the edges of the highway like a mirage, but because my mind kept arriving before my body did. Every few miles, I'd catch myself thinking ahead in small, incriminating images. The shape of a house I barely remembered. The shock of bright water in a backyard pool. Elena's voice as a memory I could almost touch. Maya was singing with the radio, one hand on the wheel, the other drumming on her thigh. She looked loose, happy, sun-ready. Her tank top was damp at the collar from iced coffee spills and sweat, and her laughter came easily, like summer belonged to her by default. I tried to match her energy. I did the right laughs, the right comments, the right nods at the right time. I even let my bare foot rest on the warm plastic of the passenger side dashboard for a second, just to feel like someone who didn't overthink everything. But my body kept betraying me in little ways. My chest would tighten for no clear reason. My stomach would flip like it was anticipating a drop. My palms would get damp against my jeans, even with the AC running cold. "Are you okay?" Maya asked at one point, glancing over without turning her head fully. "You've been quiet." I swallowed. "I'm fine." She arched an eyebrow. "That's your favorite lie." "It's not a lie," I said, too quickly. "I'm just tired." Maya hummed like she didn't buy it, but she didn't push. The road stretched ahead, sunlight pooling across the asphalt. The world kept moving, semi-trucks passing, a minivan full of kids in the next lane, a motorcycle slicing between cars like it had somewhere urgent to be. I wondered what it would feel like to be that certain. We arrived in late afternoon when the sun was softer but still hot enough to make the air feel thick. The house was exactly as I remembered, warm stucco, green plants that looked like they were thriving on attention. A front porch with chairs that suggested people actually sat and talked in real life. Maya cut the engine, pulled her sunglasses off, and stretched with a groan. "Home," she said, like a vow. My heart thudded once, hard. I reached for the door handle and paused. No, not paused. Hesitated. Maya didn't notice. She hopped out, grabbed her duffel, and headed for the front door. I followed more slowly, the heat pressing against my skin as soon as I stepped out of the car. The air smelled like sun-baked stone and something faintly floral. We hadn't even reached the porch when the door opened. And there she was, Elena. For a moment, I didn't move. I mean, my feet moved, because I had to. But something inside me went still, like the room in my mind went quiet so it could listen. She looked. The same, and not the same. Same in the way her presence seemed to shift the air around her, subtle but undeniable. Same in the way she carried herself like she didn't need to claim space because it naturally made room for her. Different because she wasn't a memory anymore. She was real. Standing in the doorway in a sleeveless white top and loose linen pants, her hair pulled up in a messy knot like she'd been doing something with her hands. Her skin was sun-kissed in a way that wasn't performative, just lived in. She had a dish towel over one shoulder, and the most absurd part was how that small domestic detail made her feel more powerful, not less. Maya bounded up the steps. "Mom!" Elena's face softened instantly. She opened her arms and Maya fell into them like she was still 16. Elena hugged her tight, pressing a kiss to her forehead. It was so natural, so intimate, so safe. And then Elena's gaze lifted. To me? Not past me, not politely over my shoulder. To me, directly, like she'd been waiting for the moment she could see me with her full attention. "Hi, Avery," she said. My name on her mouth shouldn't have done anything. It did. Heat bloomed under my ribs. My throat tightened like I'd swallowed something too big. "Hi," I managed. "Thank you for having me." Elena smiled, slow and easy. "Of course. Come in. You must be exhausted." She stepped back, and the doorway opened like an invitation. Cool air brushed my skin as I crossed the threshold. The house smelled like citrus and something warm. Rosemary, maybe. Bread. Home. I forced myself to move like a normal person. I carried my bag inside. I listened as Maya started talking a mile a minute, recounting the drive, the traffic, the playlist, who cut her off. Elena listened the way I remembered, like she was absorbing, not just hearing. She nodded at Maya, laughed at the right moments, touched Maya's shoulder once as she passed behind her. And then, casually, as if it meant nothing at all, Elena turned to me again. "You look thinner than last year," she said. My stomach dropped. Do I? Maya snorted. She never eats unless I force her. "I eat," I protested, but my voice didn't sound convincing even to me. Elena's eyes held mine. "Do you?" It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't even harsh. It was just direct. And something about the way she asked, like she actually wanted the truth, made me feel exposed. A laugh escaped me, small and uncertain. "I guess I've been busy." Elena tilted her head slightly. Busy can be another word for avoiding yourself. The air changed. Not dramatically, not like a movie. But I felt it, like a subtle shift in pressure, like my lungs didn't know whether to inhale or hold still. Maya didn't notice. She was already walking toward the hallway, calling out, "I'm taking Avery to the guest room, and then we're swimming." Elena's gaze stayed on me for a beat too long. Then she said softly, "Your room is ready." Not the room. Your room. I followed Maya down the hall, my skin buzzing, my mind reaching for explanations that didn't quite fit. It was just a sentence. Just hospitality. Just a normal mother being kind to her daughter's friend. But my body didn't react like it was normal. My pulse kept tapping at my throat fast and insistent. In the guest room, Maya threw open the curtains, letting sunlight flood in. "Okay," she said, grinning, hands on her hips. "Summer officially starts now." I set my bag down and tried to breathe like my ribs weren't tight. "Are you weirdly tense?" Maya asked, frowning slightly. "Did something happen?" "No," I said, too quickly again. "I'm just not used to being in someone else's space." Maya shrugged. "It's my house." "Exactly," my mind whispered. "Your house. Your mother. A boundary with a clear label." I changed into a swimsuit with hands that didn't quite feel like mine. My fingers shook slightly as I tied the strings, and I told myself it was just travel fatigue. Heat. Dehydration. When we stepped outside, the backyard hit me like a bright, clean shock. The pool glowed blue. The air smelled like sunscreen and chlorinated water. A light breeze moved the leaves of the lemon tree. Maya cannonballed in without hesitation, splashing water everywhere, laughing as it sprayed over the patio. I eased in more slowly, letting the cool water climb up my skin. It should have felt like relief. It didn't. Not fully. Because Elena was there. Not in the pool. Not hovering. Just sitting at the patio table under the shade umbrella, a glass of iced tea beside her, a book open in front of her like she might actually read. She looked up once, briefly. Her eyes found me again. And the strangest thing happened. I felt like I'd been caught doing something I hadn't done yet. I turned away, swimming toward the deep end, trying to shake it off. Maya swam beside me, chattering about the guy she'd started seeing. Ethan, apparently. Tall, charming. Actually listens, which made me snort because Maya's standards were both high and unpredictable. She talked about his hands on her waist at a party, the way he'd kissed her forehead when he walked her to her car. Her voice was bright, a little dreamy. I listened. I even asked questions. I tried to be the friend who was fully there. But my attention kept snapping back to the patio like a magnet. Every time I surfaced for air, I felt Elena's presence like sunlight you couldn't escape. Not intrusive, not demanding, just there. At one point, Maya splashed me and I sputtered, laughing, wiping water from my eyes. When I looked up, Elena had stood, stepping closer to the edge of the pool, probably to tell us dinner would be soon or that we were being too loud. But she didn't speak. She just looked down at me. Water clung to my eyelashes. My hair slicked back against my skull. My shoulders were bare above the waterline, goosebumped from the cool. Elena's gaze flicked over my face, then settled on my mouth for a fraction of a second. My breath caught. A small, involuntary betrayal. Her eyes lifted back to mine, and her expression didn't change. No smile, no smirk. Nothing that could be called flirtation, just awareness. Then she reached down, not touching me, but close enough that I felt the space between us tighten. "There's a towel on the chair," she said, calm. "Don't catch a chill." Her voice slid into me like warm tea. Velvet. Dangerous in its softness. I nodded too fast. "Okay." She turned away, walking back toward the house with the ease of someone who had nothing to hide. And I stayed in the water, suddenly aware of everything. The way my swimsuit clung to my ribs. The way my skin felt too alive. The way my pulse had moved lower, somewhere deep in my stomach. Fear flared up, sharp and immediate. Because if she could look at me like that, then she could see something I didn't want anyone to see. No, not anyone. Her. I dunked my head under the water, forcing myself to stay there until my lungs burned, until the world went muffled and distant and safe. When I surfaced, Maya was laughing, floating on her back, eyes closed, completely unbothered. The world kept moving around us. A bird landed on the fence and chirped. A lawnmower hummed somewhere far away. The sun shifted, lowering slowly, indifferent to whatever was happening inside my chest. And inside me, the thought returned. Quiet, persistent, impossible to fully ignore. Some things shift before you're ready to name them. I swam to the edge and gripped the tile, staring down into the water like it might give me answers. It didn't, but it reflected my face back at me. Flushed, wide-eyed, changed in a way I couldn't explain. And in the patio glass beyond the pool, I caught a faint reflection of Elena moving inside the kitchen, her silhouette calm, domestic, completely composed. Like she wasn't the reason my breathing wouldn't settle. Like she hadn't just turned my body into a question. I tightened my grip on the tile until my fingers ached. Not release, not relief, just a narrowing, a tightening that felt like the beginning of something I didn't know how to stop. The first week, I told myself it was just adjustment. New bed, new air, a house that creaked in the right places, like it had a memory of people living inside it. Maya's laughter echoing down hallways, the pool water drying into salt on my skin. Dinner plates left on the counter because no one here performed perfection. I could have lived in that comfort. I would have, if Elena hadn't been in it. She was never dramatic about her presence. She didn't enter rooms like she wanted attention. She moved through the house like it belonged to her in the most ordinary way, which somehow made it worse. It meant I couldn't explain my reaction as a response to seduction or theatrics. It meant I had no easy story to hide behind. She'd appear in the doorway with a basket of folded towels, sunlight caught in the loose strands of hair near her temple. She'd set a pitcher of water on the table with slices of lemon floating like pale coins. She'd ask Maya about her day, about Ethan, about whether he'd called, whether he'd shown up, whether he'd done the basic things boys were always praised for doing. And then, without warning, Elena would turn her attention to me, brief, precise, like a hand on a shoulder. "How are you sleeping? Do you like the guest room? Are you eating enough?" Simple questions, but they never felt simple. Because Elena didn't ask the way people asked to fill silence. She asked like she was testing the weight of the answer. Like she could tell when I tried to make my life sound smoother than it was. One afternoon, Maya went out with Ethan and left me behind with a lazy wave and a promise she'd be home by dinner. The house went quiet in a way that made every sound sharper. The soft hum of the fridge, the click of the ceiling fan, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. I wandered into the kitchen because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. Elena was there, standing at the counter with a cutting board in front of her. She'd tied her hair back, and she was slicing tomatoes with slow confidence, the knife moving like it had known her touch for years. She didn't look up immediately. She just said, "You can sit if you want." I should have left. Instead, I pulled out a stool and sat. The smell of basil filled the space. Sharp, green, alive. It made my mouth water. It also made something else happen. Something quieter and more alarming, like my body registered home as a feeling and got confused about where to put it. Elena slid the tomatoes into a bowl and finally looked at me. Not at my face first. At my hands. They were clasped too tightly in my lap, my knuckles pale. "You're tense," she said. I forced a laugh. "Am I?" "Yes." No judgment, just certainty. She wiped her fingers on a towel. "You carry it like you've been holding your breath for a long time." My chest tightened. I shifted on the stool, suddenly aware of the way the seat pressed into the backs of my thighs. "I don't know. I'm just not used to being idle." "Idle?" Elena repeated softly, like she was tasting the word. "Or alone with yourself?" My pulse flickered, fast and bright. I stared at the bowl of tomatoes like it could offer an escape route. "Maya says you're good at asking questions." Elena's mouth curved, almost a smile. "Maya says a lot of things." There was a pause. Not empty. Charged. The kind of pause that made my skin feel too thin. Elena reached for the olive oil. She poured it in a thin stream over the tomatoes, then added salt, pepper, a squeeze of lemon. Her hands were steady, her fingers long, practiced, unhurried. I watched too closely. My body reacted before I could explain it. My breath caught on the way her wrist flexed, the way her forearm tensed subtly as she stirred. It was ridiculous. It was nothing. It was. It was something. I swallowed hard, trying to pull myself back into normal. Elena set the spoon down and leaned her hip against the counter, arms folding loosely. Her gaze held mine with a kind of calm that felt like power. "You watch people," she said. My stomach dropped. "What?" "You watch," she repeated softer. "Like you're trying to learn how to be instead of letting yourself be." Heat rose under my skin. "That's not—" Elena lifted a hand slightly, not stopping me, just slowing the air. "You don't have to defend yourself. I'm not accusing." I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight, like the words were caught behind a door. Elena studied me for a moment, then turned back to the counter, as if giving me room to breathe. She began chopping garlic. The sound was rhythmic, tap, 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 grounding, almost soothing. And yet, my heartbeat didn't calm. It got louder, like it wanted attention. "I used to do that," Elena said without looking at me. "Do what?" "Live like I was waiting for permission." She paused, knife hovering for a second. "Like if I stayed quiet enough, my life wouldn't demand anything from me." The knife resumed its steady tap. I felt something crack internally. Not a dramatic shattering, just a hairline fracture running through the story I'd been telling myself. The one where I was fine, where I was simply busy, where nothing complicated was happening under the surface. My voice came out smaller than I intended. "What changed?" Elena's hand stilled. She set the knife down carefully, then looked at me again. "I got older," she said, "and I realized time doesn't ask politely." The words landed in my chest and stayed there. Outside, I heard a car pass. Somewhere down the street, a child yelled, high and bright. The world continued moving like it didn't care that I was sitting in a kitchen, feeling like my internal compass had been quietly, irreversibly altered. Elena reached for the towel again, wiping her fingers. Then she took a step closer, not close enough to touch me, but close enough that I felt it anyway. The space between us tightened like a drawn thread. "You don't have to answer this," she said. I nodded once, even though I didn't know what I was agreeing to. Elena's gaze moved over my face with a kind of focus that made my stomach turn hot. "Do you know what you want?" My breath snagged. The question was too big for the room, too intimate for the afternoon light, too dangerous to be called casual. I stared at her, and my mind scrambled for safe answers. Career, stability, independence, a plan. But none of those lived in my body the way her question did. I shook my head. Barely. "I don't know." Elena's expression didn't change, but something softened behind her eyes. "That's honest." My hands unclasped without my permission. One of them slid onto the counter edge, fingertips pressing into the cool stone as if I needed proof the world was solid. Elena's eyes dropped to my hand. Then, very slowly, she reached out. Not to take it, not to hold it, not to do anything that could be called crossing a line. She simply touched the back of my fingers with the tips of her own. It lasted maybe half a second. It was nothing. It was everything. My body reacted instantly. A hot rush up my arm, a sharp inhale I couldn't control, my pulse turning frantic. The contact was so light it could have been accidental, but it wasn't. The precision of it told the truth. I froze. Elena lifted her hand away, as if she'd only been checking the temperature of a surface. And still, the place where she'd touched me stayed lit. I stared at my own fingers like they belonged to someone else. My mind tried to assemble an explanation that wasn't humiliating, something logical, something clean. But the fracture widened, because I couldn't pretend anymore that what I felt was abstract. It had a location, It had heat. It had a name I didn't want to say. A private moral question rose up in me, uninvited, and it didn't feel philosophical. It felt like a threat. If I let myself want this, what kind of person does that make me? Elena stepped back, giving the space back to air, to normalcy. She turned to the stove and clicked on the burner, the flame whooshing alive with a soft gasp. "Dinner will be simple," she said, as if we hadn't just altered something foundational. Maya loves simple. She pretends she doesn't, but she does. I tried to speak. My voice didn't come. Elena glanced at me again, briefly. "You're shaking." I looked down and realized she was right. Not visibly, not enough for someone across a room to notice, but in the small ways that mattered. My fingers trembling against the counter, my breathing uneven, my stomach pulled tight like a fist. "I'm not," I lied. Elena didn't call me out. She just nodded slowly, like she understood the lie as a survival instinct. "You don't have to be afraid of feeling," she said quietly, "but you do have to respect what it costs." The words hit close to the bone, because the cost was suddenly clear in a way it hadn't been before. Maya's trust, the safety of this house, the simplicity of being the friend. The thin line between gratitude and ruin, the way one mistake could become a story people told about me forever. I saw it all in a flash, and still, my body didn't step back. It leaned in, not physically, internally, like something in me had been starving and had just been handed proof that food existed. A door opened somewhere in the house. The screen door, maybe. A rush of outside air. Maya's voice floated in, loud and happy as she came home, calling out, "Mom, we're starving!" Elena's shoulders didn't tense. Her face didn't change. She moved like the moment between us could be folded away neatly, hidden behind dinner plates and conversation. But I couldn't fold it away. I couldn't go back to being a person who hadn't felt Elena's fingertips on my skin and understood, all at once, that this wasn't imagination. This was recognition. Maya burst into the kitchen, sunburned and smiling, talking about Ethan and the movie they'd seen, dropping her bag on the floor like she owned the world. She didn't look at me closely enough to notice anything was wrong. She hugged her mother, kissed her cheek, and started rummaging through the fridge. Elena smiled at her, warm and effortless. Then Elena looked at me over Maya's shoulder. Just a fraction of a second. A silent exchange. Not a promise. Not a threat. Just the quiet confirmation that she had felt it too. And I sat there, my heart still racing, my hand still burning where she hadn't even really touched me, suspended between the life I'd been living and the life that had just become possible. After that afternoon, nothing looked different. That was the cruelty of it. The house stayed the same color in the evening light. The lemon tree still dropped fruit like it didn't care where it landed. Maya still left wet footprints across the tile and complained about Ethan being bad at texting but good in person, as if that was a solvable equation. Dinner still happened. Plates clinked. Glasses sweated in the heat. Elena served food with calm hands and asked Maya about her day with a softness that didn't crack. And I sat there, smiling at the right moments, passing the salt, listening to a conversation that felt suddenly far away, like I was watching my own life through a window. My skin remembered Elena's touch even when nothing was touching me. It was the kind of memory that wasn't visual. It lived under the surface, in nerves, in breath, in the way my body became alert whenever she entered a room. That night, after Maya went to her room to FaceTime Ethan, I stood at the kitchen sink and washed dishes I didn't need to wash. I kept my hands in warm water, watching soap bubbles slide down my wrists, pretending I was doing something useful. Elena dried beside me, quiet. We didn't talk much. Not at first. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was deliberate. Like we both knew that words could tip the balance, could turn the thing we were pretending not to name into something that demanded consequence. At one point, my plate slipped slightly in my grip. Water splashed onto the counter. I inhaled sharply, more from nerves than surprise. Elena's hand moved immediately, steadying the plate before it could fall. Her fingers brushed mine again. Another half second, another accidental, not accidental contact, and my entire body flared. My breath stuttered. Elena didn't look at our hands. She kept her eyes on the plate like it was the only thing that mattered. "Careful," she said softly. I nodded too fast. Yeah. My heart was beating like I'd done something wrong. And maybe I had. Because the contact wasn't an event anymore. It was a pattern. A small door that kept opening in tiny, deniable increments. And each time it did, I felt myself step closer to a line I wasn't sure I could stop at. When we finished, Elena set the towel down and leaned against the counter. She looked tired in a way that didn't make her weaker, just more human. A faint crease at the corner of her mouth, a shadow under her eyes from a day that had held more than chores. "You're quiet," she said. I laughed under my breath. I could say the same about you. Elena's gaze held mine. "I'm quiet on purpose." That landed like a confession. I dried my hands on my shorts, suddenly aware of how small the kitchen felt, how warm, how close she was without moving any closer. "I don't know how to be here," I admitted, and the words surprised me as they left my mouth. Like, I don't know how to be normal. Elena's eyes softened, but her face stayed composed. "Normal is overrated." I swallowed. "That's not what I mean." "I know," she said, and her voice was so certain it made my stomach twist. "You mean you don't know how to be in a room with someone who sees you?" My throat tightened. I looked away, focusing on the small details that could keep me grounded. The lemon slices in a bowl on the counter, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of Maya's laughter upstairs through her closed door. The outside world continued moving. Somewhere beyond the backyard fence, a car door slammed. A neighbor's TV murmured. A dog barked twice, then went quiet. And I stood there, barefoot on cool tile, feeling like my entire life had narrowed to the space between Elena's words. Elena spoke again, quieter. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." "You didn't," I said immediately, because the truth was worse than discomfort. It wasn't discomfort. It was exposure. It was hunger. It was fear. I turned back to her, and my body reacted before I could decide anything, my breath catching, my pulse shifting lower, my skin heating as if her gaze had weight. Elena watched it happen. I could tell she did. Her eyes dropped to my mouth again for that brief, dangerous flicker. And then she looked away first. A restraint so controlled it felt like discipline. "You should go to bed," she said. The words were gentle, almost practical. But in my chest, something tightened, sharp. Not release, not relief. A pulling. I nodded, even though I didn't move. Elena's fingers slid along the edge of the counter, tracing the cool stone like she needed something to do with her hands. I understood that impulse too well. "Avery," she said, and this time my name sounded different. Lower, more careful. I looked up. Elena's expression had shifted into something I hadn't seen before. Less hostess, less mother, more woman with a decision in her throat. "There are things," she began, then stopped. She exhaled through her nose, slow. "There are things you can't unfeel once you feel them." My mouth went dry. I know. The admission was terrifying, because it meant I'd crossed something already, even without moving. Elena held my gaze for a long moment, like she was measuring the cost of what she might say next. Then she stepped away from the counter and walked toward the hallway, not leaving the kitchen entirely, just shifting position so she wasn't trapped by the space between us. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said. My throat tightened hard. "I'm not afraid of you." Elena's eyes flickered. "No?" I shook my head. "I'm afraid of—" I stopped, because finishing the sentence felt like stepping off a cliff. Elena waited. She didn't rush me. She never rushed. I forced the words out, quiet. "I'm afraid of what it means." Elena's shoulders rose and fell in a controlled breath. "Good," she said softly. "You should be." The answer wasn't cruel. It wasn't cold. It was honest. And honesty was the thing that made this so dangerous. There was no villain here. No easy person to blame. Just two people standing too close to a line that could ruin someone else's life. Maya's laughter floated down the stairs then, bright and careless. "Mom, come hear what Ethan just said. Oh my God, it's so stupid." The sound snapped the moment into two realities, the one Elena and I were living in, and the one the house was still pretending to be. Elena's gaze moved toward the stairs, her face smoothing back into calm in the span of a heartbeat. She looked back at me once more, and something passed between us. An agreement, maybe, or a warning. "Go," she said again, softer. "Please." I should have listened. I should have walked away, climbed the stairs, shut myself into the guest room, and let the night pass like a normal night. Instead, I took a step closer. Not much. Just enough that the air changed. Elena's breath caught. Subtle, but real. And that small sound, that involuntary human reaction, fractured me. Because it meant she wasn't untouched by this. She wasn't immune. She was choosing restraint. Not because she didn't feel it, but because she did. My voice came out rough. "Do you regret inviting me?" Elena's eyes stayed on mine. "No." The single word made my chest ache. No regret, no denial, just clarity. My hand lifted without permission, fingers hovering near her arm. I didn't touch her. I stopped myself at the last second, feeling the electricity of almost contact. Elena watched my hand hover. Then, very slowly, she reached up and closed her fingers around my wrist. Not gripping, just holding me in place. Consent in the pause. A boundary offered instead of forced. Her skin was warm, her touch steady. My entire body went rigid, then soft. I swallowed. "I don't know what I'm doing." Elena's voice dropped. "Neither do I." And that was the most frightening thing she could have said, because it made her human in a way that didn't absolve anything. It just made the stakes real. Her thumb moved once, barely, over the pulse point on my wrist. A tiny gesture. A heartbeat counted. I inhaled, shaky. "Elena." Her name felt wrong in my mouth and right in my body. Elena's eyes closed for a fraction of a second. When she opened them, her gaze was darker. Not with lust, not with hunger alone, but with the weight of someone who understood consequence intimately. "Don't," she whispered. Not a command. A plea. And that was the moment the consequence truly arrived. Not in touch, not in kiss, but in the realization that my desire wasn't private anymore. It had reached her. It had landed. It was being held back by her choice, not by my uncertainty. I pulled my wrist free gently because I had to do something, anything, to keep from collapsing into her. I stepped back. My breath was uneven, my skin too hot, my mind blank in the way it got when something in me was overloaded. Elena watched me like she was watching a storm gather. Upstairs, Maya called again, louder. "Mom!" Elena didn't move immediately. She stayed with me for one more beat, And in that beat, the fragile equilibrium of the house tilted. We were no longer safe behind deniability. We were simply quiet. And quiet, I was learning, could be louder than confession. I turned toward the hallway, forcing my legs to work. Each step felt like walking away from a fire I'd only just started to understand. Behind me, Elena's voice came, soft, controlled, almost steady. "Good night, Avery." I didn't answer right away. In the doorway, I paused, my hand on the frame, feeling my own pulse still racing where her fingers had held me. I managed, finally, without turning back. "Good night." Then I went upstairs, and the air in the hallway felt thinner, like it couldn't hold all the things I wasn't saying. In the guest room, I shut the door quietly, leaned my forehead against it, and listened to the sound of my own breathing. It didn't calm. It tightened, as if my body understood something my mind still refused to accept. That once someone reveals you to yourself, you don't get to go back to the person you were before. The last night of summer arrived quietly. No thunder, no dramatic sky, just heat that lingered after sunset and a house that felt too aware of itself. Maya had gone out with Ethan again. A late movie. Promises of milkshakes after. She'd kissed my cheek on her way out and told me not to stay up waiting. "I won't," I'd said. I was already waiting. The house felt different when it was just Elena and me. Not empty. Concentrated. Like the air had weight. I stood in the backyard, barefoot on warm stone, staring at the pool reflecting a broken moon. The water barely moved. The lemon tree cast a long shadow that reached almost to my feet. I heard the screen door slide open behind me. I didn't turn right away. I knew it was her. "You're leaving tomorrow," Elena said softly. "Yes." The word felt heavier than it should have. She stepped closer. I could hear the faint brush of fabric against fabric, the quiet rhythm of her breathing. The night smelled like chlorine and citrus and something else. Something warmer. I turned. She wasn't dressed for guests. Just a loose cotton dress, thin straps, hair down for once, falling around her shoulders like she'd stopped trying to contain anything. We stood facing each other with too much history for something that had technically never happened. "You've been avoiding me today," she said. I swallowed. I didn't trust myself. A flicker in her eyes. Not surprise. Recognition. Elena nodded once. "That's fair." Silence again. But this silence was different. It wasn't hiding. It was gathering. My body reacted before I gave it permission. My pulse climbed. My breath shortened. My skin felt too tight, like it couldn't hold what was inside me anymore. "I don't want to leave like this," I said. "Like what?" "Like I imagined everything." Elena's jaw tightened slightly. She stepped closer, not touching, not yet, but close enough that I felt the heat of her. "You didn't imagine it," she said. The words slid into me like truth finally allowed to speak. My chest cracked open. That was the shift. Not touch. Not yet. Just the removal of doubt. The outside world continued moving, crickets humming, a car passing somewhere beyond the block, a neighbor's laughter drifting faintly through the air. And inside that ordinary night, something irreversible stood between us. "I think you already know," Elena said. The same words. But this time, they weren't quiet suggestion. They were acknowledgement. My body moved before my fear could catch it. I stepped into her space. She didn't retreat. Our breath mingled first. Warm. Uneven. The air between our mouths charged and fragile. My hand lifted slowly, visibly, giving her time to stop me. Giving her time to choose. She didn't. My fingers touched her waist. Light. Tentative. Asking. Elena's eyes searched my face one last time, and then she closed the distance. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was deliberate. Her mouth met mine with a softness that felt like gravity shifting, not consuming, not claiming, just real. Heat bloomed instantly, deep and steady. My body melted into it like it had been waiting for this exact pressure, this exact fit. I exhaled into her. She answered with a slow inhale that made my knees weaken. It was terrifying how natural it felt. My hands slid higher along her sides, learning the shape of her through thin fabric. She responded by threading her fingers gently into my hair. Not pulling, not forcing, just holding. Time didn't stop. It narrowed. Every sensation sharpened, the warmth of her lips, the subtle shift of her breath, the faint taste of lemon and tea and something uniquely her. I felt seen, not as Maya's friend, not as a guest, as a woman. The thought hit me like a fracture healing wrong and right at the same time. I leaned deeper, and she let me. The kiss opened slightly, careful but no longer innocent. Heat moved lower in my body, pooling, undeniable. Her hand slid down my neck to my shoulder, then to my waist again, holding me closer. This wasn't accidental anymore. This wasn't abstract. This was crossing. My mind flickered with the risks. Maya's trust, the fragile ecosystem of this house, the permanent shift this would create. But my body didn't step back. It leaned into her like something long dormant had finally found oxygen. Elena pulled back first. Not abruptly, gently. Her forehead rested against mine, our breathing tangled. My lips felt swollen. My heart felt exposed. "Avery," she whispered. There was no anger in it, no regret. Just wait. "I know," I said. Because I did. I knew this couldn't unfold into something simple. I knew we were standing on a line that didn't bend easily, but I also knew something else now. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't suspended. I wasn't waiting for permission. "I don't want to be someone who runs from what she feels," I said quietly. Elena's thumb brushed my cheek, tender, almost reverent. "And I don't want to be someone who takes what isn't mine to take." The words cut and soothed at the same time. We stood there, bodies close but not moving forward. Desire still humming. Consequence fully present. She kissed me again. Softer this time, a goodbye and a beginning wrapped into one. No rushing into rooms, no tearing at clothes. Just mouths learning, memorizing. Her hands on my waist, mine at her shoulders. Breath shared, heat acknowledged. And then she stepped back. The space between us returned slowly like tide pulling away. "When you know who you are," she said. I nodded. "Come find me." It wasn't a promise of secrecy. It wasn't a fantasy. It was a condition. Clarity first, choice second. I felt different standing there, not devastated, not reckless, awake. Some things shift before you're ready to name them, and some shifts don't need to be acted on to change you forever. The night air cooled against my flushed skin. The pool reflected us separately now, two silhouettes where there had been one. I wasn't the girl who arrived at the start of summer. I wasn't confused about why men's hands had always felt like borrowed weight. I wasn't floating outside my own life anymore. I stepped toward the house. Elena stayed where she was. But this time, the distance didn't feel like loss. It felt like intention. Upstairs, I packed my bag with steady hands. I touched my lips once, lightly. They still remembered. Morning would come. Maya would laugh and drive and talk about Ethan's plans. And I would leave, not empty, not broken, revealed. The quiet inside me wasn't empty anymore. It was certain. And as I lay down in the guest bed for the last time, staring at the ceiling I'd memorized, I understood something I hadn't understood before. Some women don't choose you, they uncover you. If I had stayed quiet my whole life, would I have ever known who I truly was? Some stories whisper instead of shouting. They linger because what mattered was never said. Thank you for listening. If this story stayed with you, if you felt the shift before she did, stay with us. There are more quiet revelations waiting.